Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be digging deep, deep, deep into the bowels of DAX and talking about what I believe, well, to the best of my knowledge, is an entirely unexplored subject, which is reserved words. What are the reserved words in DAX, right? How many of them are there? This has come up a couple of times on the forums, actually, and it just came up recently. Somebody was trying to create a variable, and it was a particular name, and they kept on getting an error in their formula. And I'm like, well, that's a reserved word. You can't use that. But the most often when I see, people on the forums ask this question about reserved words in DAX, the most typical response I see is, well, just go to dax.guide, see the left-hand pane. Those are all reserved words. So, I mean, like, obviously, right, we can't come in here, create a measure, and say something like, var, all except equals, 1, right? We can't do this because all except is a reserved word, right? We can't do like add columns, right? Because, well, it's going to give me an error, but add columns is a reserved word. Except I use time. Time's a DAX function, works perfectly fine. In fact, just so you know, return time. It works perfectly fine. So I can create a card visual. I can put this in a measure, and it returns 1, right? I can use left. Not a reserved word, right? I can use right. Not a reserved word. But things like date is a reserved word. So the interesting thing about this is that this concept that every DAX function is a reserved word is entirely incorrect, is unbelievably incorrect. In fact, in my testing, I found that far, far, far less than half of maybe like 20% of DAX functions are actually reserved words. So it blows that notion right out of the water, right? I can name a variable, probably 80% of the different DAX functions I could name a variable that, and it's just going to work just fine. And so, so then I started doing some more exploring about this, and the one that came up in the forum most recently was current. Current is a reserved word in DAX. Who knew, right? Would you guess that binary is a reserved word? Or maybe perhaps before, underscore, and after is also a reserved word. But before and after without is not. So the question becomes, what are the reserved words in DAX and how many of them are there? Well, lucky for you, I have done the research. And I've actually published out to my page, gregdeckler.com, into the bowels of DAX reserved words. And here I present a list of almost 350 words. So 346, I believe, to be exact. And here's the list of all the reserved words in DAX that I have been able to find thus far. Right? It goes on for forever. So there you have it. If you want to know what the reserved words in DAX are, I've answered the question here. And so hopefully that, I don't know how useful it is because, right, I mean, the way you avoid this problem, right, is you just put in current. You put in an underscore or a double underscore in front of any word, and it's no longer reserved. And you're not going to run into this problem that it's a reserved word, which is why you always see my DAX code. I put a double underscore in front of it. Just a habit of mine, but it prevents me from having that problem, right? So there's not much really more to this video actually, but so if you wanted to know, okay, Greg, are you a masochist? Did you just sit down and start typing words and everything? No, not exactly, right? So what I did was I took and found reserved words for Microsoft Access. I found the reserved words for MDX, and I found the reserved words for SQL Server. And what I did then was I entered them into, I just did some I actually used Excel. I pasted them in. I created some Excel formulas to create my var syntax. Then I'd paste that into Notepad, kind of basically be able to have one measure that had all of these different bars defined, and then pasted it into Power BI, and then it would tell me everything that was red squiggly underscored was a reserved word. Wouldn't let me create a variable with that name. So that's in a nutshell how I came up with this. So is this complete? Is this complete? Is it a complete listing of all DAX reserved words? I have no idea. I have no idea. I do know it's some weird combination of Microsoft Access reserved words, MDX reserved words, SQL reserved words. But beyond that, I really don't know, and because I don't have access to the source code to tell you. Unlike the Russian hackers, probably they know this answer. That filtered, got it that hacked into Microsoft via MF. Somebody not having MFA turned on. Brilliant. But so the Russian hackers know all the reserved words in DAX, but I do not, because I do not have access to the source code. So there may be more that are lurking out there somewhere, but I don't know what they are. So anyway, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.